Let's invite the next panel up. First one invites up the leader of our panel, Mike Turner. Mike Turner is an urbanite, a practicing architect and urban activist, UNESCO chair in urban design and conservation studies, advisor to UNESCO, and one of the initiators of the UN Habitat Microhub Consortium. Please welcome Mike Turner, and hi there, David Simon. Come on up.
Thank you very much, David, for introducing me. And we have in this panel an array of 5 amazing people from around the world. I would just like to open simply by saying that the metropolises will represent human settlement typology with the largest population worldwide. And this would be something by 2035, 39% of the global population and 2/3 of the urban population. The number of metropolises will continue to increase in the coming years and are projected to exist by 2035, well over 2,000. But just to give you an understanding about the change, a new metropolis as defined by UN Habitat will arise every 2 weeks in the next 15 years for a total of 429 new metropolises. So I think that what we're looking at, a city is not a large village, and a metropolis is not a large city. It is a completely new form, which we then have to get our heads around. And if we're talking about 2/3 of the world population, this is something really critical. Recognizing this dramatic change, our research started with some questions. What specific role heritage can play in the 21st century? What are the limits of the current heritage paradigms, and how metropolitan typologies can impact change them? So we're looking at what innovative roles can the metropolis play in promoting cultural and natural heritage, but also conversely, what are the innovative roles that cultural and natural heritage can play in promoting the metropolis? We're coming together now with something like 13 universities and 13 metropolises around the world. It's an open-ended consortium, so people listening in can come and suggest new ideas and new parts of the consortium as part of the UN Habitat University Partnership Program of Metro Hub. So I think without further delay, we'd like to introduce our first panelist, which will be Eric Huberecht. Eric is an architect and planner, and he has been very much involved in the affairs of the Urban and Environmental Planning Agency of the Greater Paris region. But linking culture and nature, he has now taken on board the responsibility of also understanding how the biodiversity of the region is now integrated within the metropolis. This is a great potential which we need to uncover. Eric, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this invitation. Just a few words, because we have few time, to say that as Mike said, that the metropolitan area is a new scale, and what is interesting regarding the concept of city or urban areas is that the metropolis is covering urban and rural areas together, because the influence of the main nodes or the main urban centers is larger than only the urban agglomeration. And so we can have with this concept the idea to put together the question of culture and nature. If we have in mind that how the metropolis is using culture, or there is a culture is really mobilized by the metropolitan areas to make their city marketing. If we have in mind what Cairo, Paris, Beijing, Delhi, Moscow, Istanbul are using culture to promote their cities worldwide in a large competition between the large metropolis, we know that culture is a clear asset for the cities. But at the same time, we consider that because of the scale of the metropolis, nature is also a very big asset of the metropolis. If we have in mind some example, like protected areas in Paris with Forêt de Fontainebleau, for example, or in Rio de Janeiro with Perugia Park, or in Cape Town, or in Mumbai with the national park or in yes, so there is for example in New York with Central Park, we have a different scale. We know that the nature is also an asset that is promoted by cities for the quality of life, but not only for that, also to emerge and sometimes to have them in the World Heritage Site. It is the case of Fontainebleau, for example. And so we're working with different metropolitan areas like Seoul, New York, Buenos Aires, Moscow, Istanbul, etc. Working on the metropolitan heritage. What is the heritage of the metropolis, including nature and culture, but also can we consider the metropolis as an heritage because it is the main artifact of our century, the 21st century, and so we'll this will be our legacy for the next generation. And so the last question we have in mind is how to upgrade or to give more value in the metropolis, in its artifacts, in its assets, in its function, and to create the future heritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. I think if I have to relate to People Baba about the spirituality, I think that our capacity is in fact in bringing culture and nature together. And this is something, the best way, in fact, we're going to then allow then the evolution of an identity which gives a spirit to the city. But we're not just architects and planners, we've got a wide range of disciplines within the consortium. And our next panelist is Claire Melhuish, and she is from the Bartlett School of Architecture, my alma mater of many years ago. She heads the Urban Lab, and also, more importantly, the participation in the curating of the City Research Cluster in the Center for Critical Heritage Studies at UCL, which is together also with the University of Gothenburg. This is really something which is challenging existing paradigms of heritage, and therefore it is actually bringing together, engaging multiple voices and decolonizing perspectives. You'll help me that on, Claire. Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mike. So yes, hello. I'm very pleased to be here. And as Mike says, I'm director of the UCL Urban Laboratory, which is a department in the Bartlett Faculty of the Built Environment, and a cross-disciplinary network for urban research, teaching and engagement across UCL in London, in which I'm also lead on the Urban Heritage Priority Area, as well as coordinator of the Curating the City Research Cluster in the Centre for Critical Heritage Studies, which Mike has mentioned. So we're very much concerned with a critical cross-disciplinary and transdisciplinary approach to understanding the importance of urban heritage, both material and intangible, and the role of cities and metropoli in promoting cultural and natural heritage. And for that reason, we've been delighted to join the Heritopolis network of institutions and cities as lead university researchers on London, collaborating with colleagues in the Greater London Authority and in Historic England, two agencies which have a key determining role in the shape of heritage practice and policy in this metropolis. One of our particular concerns, which we explore in Urban Lab through our research and in our taught master's module, Histories of Global London, is the decolonisation of heritage narratives in London, as well as more widely in the UK and globally, through engaging multiple voices in the representation, evaluation and making of urban heritage, present and future. London, of course, is a complex, multicultural, post-colonial city, but often these multiple stories of identity and belonging between London and elsewhere are not adequately represented and communicated in authorised heritage discourse. And that really has quite profound impacts on the lived experience of Londoners from diverse social and ethnic backgrounds. These concerns and controversies have come to the fore with the Black Lives Matter protests, the toppling of statues and renaming of buildings and places in recent times, all of which have been very much in the news. as well as in the official responses to these events. So they do demonstrate that some of London's communities continue to feel undervalued and underrepresented. London has forged a path in developing innovative practices in engaging with these perspectives and concerns, and continues to do so. In 2005, for example, the GLA published its report Delivering Shared Heritage, the Mayor's Commission on African and Asian Heritage, while its Commission for Diversity in the Public Realm is an ongoing project at regional governance level. Historic England also runs initiatives to explore and publicise underrepresented histories. For example, its 2016 to 18 exhibition I Am London, which looked to explore the complexity of London's many identities. Much work remains to be done, however, to cement such initiatives as core priorities within the existing structures of heritage management. And so the collaborative and comparative network established by Heritopolis supports us as university researchers working with critical, speculative and participatory methods, including creative approaches and countermapping, to partner with our colleagues in policy and practice and actively pilot innovative roles for this globally connected metropolis, London, to model in its engagement with contested heritage and in the re-evaluation of what and whom we memorialise and why.
Great. I think that this almost challenges people, Baba. In other words, exactly from one narrative telling a story, but to telling multiple stories at the same time, and how in fact perhaps that we can actually do these activities. It's a complex part. But I think that we're also, heritage is not the past, it's the future. The architecture of today is the heritage of tomorrow. And in fact, what sort of new narratives are taking place? Is this the same story being repeated, or does it in fact, as it go from grandma to grandson to great grandchild, and what happens as it moves along and then changes? I think that this is something which is being faced very much in London. Thank you, Claire, for sharing this. But this brings us straight over to New York, which is then perhaps even a similar or a more powerful example of immigrants coming together and having acculturation. So it's great to have Moses Gates. He is the Regional Plan Association Vice President for Housing and Neighborhood Planning, and he leads the organizations in issues of affordable housing, economic development, and urban design. The Regional Planning Association is really something quite special and unique. When I actually, after the Corona, I hope to be able to actually be there and see exactly, feel some of the spirit and the heartbeat of the city. But I think that what is really special about it is that the Regional Plan Association believes in harnessing the power of evidence to drive effective policy and practice. And this is something which is quite unique, which I see for an NGO working together. So Moses, you have the screen.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Mike. RPA definitely is a very fun and special place to work. You know, there's a few counterparts around the globe, but being a non-governmental organization dedicated to good planning, good policy, objective data and outcomes in a metro area, in a very fragmented metro area politically, and long-term solutions is a niche that I think is a really needed one, and that many cities can benefit from. I was asked to talk a little bit about the role of the kind of growth of digitalization and digital culture in preservation, which is fairly interesting. You know, RPA are mostly orthodox planners. We don't get involved, you know, a lot in kind of softer issues of heritage preservation and culture and things like that. But we are very, very interested in the role of technology and what it can play. And in terms of culture and digitization, what our kind of increasing technology has done is not so much produced culture as disseminated culture throughout the city. And I want to give, and given ordinary New Yorkers the ability to do so, and really kind of eliminated a lot of the cultural gatekeeping that might be around town. You no longer need to fill out the paperwork. You can grab a camera, you can document things, you can get everything out there. I want to give just very quickly a couple of examples of how this has changed some very ingrained cultural aspects in New York. So as many of you might know, New York is really the home of graffiti. And graffiti is an art form, and also graffiti is an expression of being able to go places. And that is to a large extent what it started as, and to a large extent what remains. There's an artistic component, and I think that's well understood, but there's also a component of writing your name in places that are hard to get to, that are universal, of seeing your name all over the city. And it's a very ingrained part of the culture of New York, not without its controversies and hate, but it's there and it's unarguable. And this started in the 70s, kind of before the advent of easy digital cameras. And what you've seen lately is that culture of showing you own the city, you belong to the city, you go places, has been slowly transformed from graffiti culture into photography culture, into Instagram, with the growth, and before Instagram, even websites. With the growth of accounts dedicated to taking photos on roofs, on bridges, and subway tunnels, and things like that. And it's interesting because this also has led to another uptick in the monetization of this culture. Whereas before, in graffiti in the early 80s, the artistic aspect is what drove the monetization, getting into downtown galleries and things like that. Right now, it's a combination of the digitalization and the growth of cryptocurrency that is driving this, where there are now photo series of people on top of buildings, bridges, places like that, that are selling for, where the non-fungible token, not the print, the NFTs, are selling for upwards of $300,000 and are multi-million multi-million-dollar series, which is incredibly interesting to me. How that's managed to be monetized in this new digital culture. And that's just one example of city culture and heritage finding a new way to be monetized with the growth of digitalization and cryptocurrency. The other thing that's interesting, that's grown from a digital component, is mapping. And the ability of lay people to kind of map the city in different ways and demonstrate different things is amazing. For instance, one of my friends is walking every street in New York City, has a digital camera, and has a website and map out there where they're posting one photo from almost every block describing the culture. And that's something that, would be, to put that in a physical book, would be encyclopedic. It would be absolutely impossible to disseminate that kind of culture of New York absent these advances in digitization. I will reserve comment on NFTs and their effect on the larger level, as in the comments. I only pointed out to say, to point out its effect on the culture and monetization. And we'll turn it back over to Mike. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I don't know what Walter Benjamin would have said about reproduction in the digital age as opposed to the photographic age, but I think that the digital era has in fact empowered, as opposed to institutions, has empowered the individual. And this is obviously is creating sort of all this knowledge and information and the capacity of mapping, as you've said, and also about bringing graffiti, in fact, to a global audience. In other words, how, in fact, can we tell the story in a more global way, in which everybody can understand it without David Maddox's working with the artificial intelligent translations and the human translations, the graffiti impact speaks to us all. Anyway, we now, I can't yet see Antonella, so I would prefer to move over.
Yes, she is here.
Yeah, but she's
Don't
not
touch her.
on board.
Yep, she's there.
I'm here. Good morning. Sorry.
Ah, okay, sorry. Okay. So we're moving back into Europe to Milan, and it's a great pleasure to invite Antonella Contin, who is currently in Mexico. She is part of the Department of Architecture at the Politecnico di Milano. She is a coordinator of another urban lab, so we've got lots of urban labs working together. She also is is part of a number of EU-funded projects. The interesting one, Training for Education, Learning and Leadership towards a new metropolitan discipline. In other words, there's new subjects and new curricula which needs to be addressed in dealing with the metropolis. So she is dealing with the Metropolitan Architecture Project, Urban Growth Sustainable Model, and she's a great friend from Milan. So Antonella, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. May I share some images or not?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I hope that you should see my screen. Yeah.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Good morning. Good afternoon. I would like to introduce the fact that for us, we are trying to deal with the new metropolitan discipline, and the narrative for us is related to one of the moments of our analysis that we name problem finding. So we have to understand, first of all, how the territory was shaped and managed. So when we speak about a narrative of a metropolitan city, we are speaking about the history of the city. We are speaking about the daily life, the chronicle of the city, and also we are dealing with the way in which the social project should be linked with the individual project. So when MSL Lab, that our research unit is speaking about the narration of a territory, we are speaking about not verbal narrative that is mapping. So first of all, we are looking for the remarkable point that we should find of the territories that we should find towards the history. And then we, following the idea of Herodotus, we have to look for the history, for the life of the people that shape this territory. So our map, first of all, the narrative of our map, first of all, is looking for the way in which different cultures regulate water, cultivate and raise animal. We should quote Virgilio, but also the Bible, how they built a market and road, and right now all the entire series of infrastructure. So our aim is to read the idea of the city of the past as a cultural way mark on the ground. And what we have to do is to analyze which are the new metrics of the nowadays metropolitan territorial values, and we should compare with the value of the past. We try to understand which was the really knowledge of the territory. Right now we are working in Burkina Faso, in Ouagadougou, and it's really a living laboratory because we had all the entire knowledge of the local people, the Mossi tribe, that were able to manage their territory because they were able to understand the relationship between the territory and the entire climate situation, ambient and environment. So we define the different narratives of Ouagadougou, trying to interpret the Mossi capability to manage the water, the French colonization that superimposed a grid on the city, on the territory, but also produce an incredible, interesting system, water system. And we try also to compare the past colonization with the nowadays colonization. You should see this image that colonized the country, introducing small airport to move the gold in particular. So the different narrative for us are relevant to understand how the territory was managed. Our project tried to produce an inclusive planning approach, try to involve the citizen into this process. And we have to understand the metrics, the whole together right now, the plan and not plan, the LOT and non-LOT part of the city. We have to find the code toward the different narratives, a code of mediation between the two cities. So how the two different practices of the management of the territory should be connected together. And we have to understand which is the model of the city growth that should define the infrastructure that can transform the not planned extension of the city without us destroying it. So our methodology, we name our methodology metropolitan cartography. Metropolitan cartography works with software, a glossary software that try to figure out through some words and related concept, how is it possible to understand the knowledge, the structure of the knowledge that allow us to produce this new path between the planned and not planned city. So our why is the need for a rule of structural form that is effective concerning the today needs, but also that is look to the city long span time for the construction of the history of the urban biography of the city. The what is the possible coexistence between the Western form of urban morphology, the LOT, the planned city, that resists because it's able to restructure itself from inside, and the local non-LOT model, which represents the extension. But the how is the way in which the old notable point of the city right now was able to be connected with the new metropolitan epicenter, and in that process to be able to connect the LOT and the non-LOT part of the city. And finally, so the aim, the result of our narrative is the project. Our target is the project, and our metropolitan cartography trying to extract very few elements that we have to compound together, because at the end, in this case, you see the long green infrastructure, the barrages that constitute the old, but also the new possible force line that should structure that connection between the expansion of the city and the old city, that allow us to produce a master plan that try to merge and tame the two plan, but also images of the city. I think that I finish my time and I should stop here my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Antonella. I think that one thing, the narrative which is now coming back again is, in other words, it's a way by which we can design. And it's, I think that this interrelationship is really critical, and it's beyond the city. That is why the metropolis and its multiplicities are really critical. Exactly how do we create then from a single instrument to a whole symphony, and weaving this together is obviously something which is really critical. So the next question is really, in fact, the comparative perspective. I've been rereading Franz Boas' 1896 seminal paper on the limitations of the comparative method. And I think that as an anthropologist, he actually challenges this issue of comparisons, chalk and cheese, or as Shakespeare might have said, comparisons are odious. But for this, I actually have to go to David Simon, a new friend and part of the London hub, which is coming together, as Claire had mentioned. He is currently, he's been appointed a commissioner for the Commission on Sustainable Agriculture Intensification. He's a professor in the Department of Geography at Royal Holloway in London. But more interestingly, he was director of the Mistra Urban Futures, which was together with Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg. And I think that this is very important because, as I said previously, heritage is not just about the past, but about the future. So, David, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Mike. I won't be sharing the screen, but simply talking to you all. And picking up your last point in your kind introduction, Mike, those in the audience who perhaps participated in the inaugural Nature of Cities Festival, which was face-to-face in Paris, might recall the plenary dialogue that we held there on using different forms of transdisciplinary co-production in different cities as the basis for cross-urban comparison, not least between, if you like, the global north and south. And picking up the challenge that you've just implicitly issued, the logic of comparison is not to be odious, but it's also to avoid getting hooked on the very specific micro contextual detail. So the sort of very live, vivid images that you just saw in Antonella's presentation, for example, on Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso, the logic of the comparison in this kind of trajectory is to try to find the answer to the question of how far can we compare in terms of drawing out key common features, processes, points of similarity and difference. It's not to valorize or say this place is better or further down the track or more advanced in whatever kind of narrative you like than somewhere else. It's about the point of generalization, how far is it sensible to generalize, how meaningful is it, and crucially, using that as the basis for providing guidelines of what we prefer to call good practice, not best practice in the sort of traditional socio-technical expert-driven knowledge model, but co-produced where all the stakeholders involved in this case in developing, formatting, advancing cultural and natural heritage in the rich complexity, use it, as you said, Mike, not just in a backward-looking conservationist ethos, but actually fundamentally, again, this picks up some of Moses' points in his intervention, of forward-looking and ensuring that all inputs, all stakeholders, including the poor and the marginalized and the minority groups whose narratives and discourses and heritages are often overlooked or ignored or deliberately excluded, can be included in how we can try to integrate to enrich that which we have as the basis for going forward. So in order to ensure that we can do this comparative work in a meaningful way, we undertook a survey in each of the cities where Heritopolis is currently represented, working together between a relatively junior academic researcher and a more senior one, and also colleagues in the respective metropolitan authority or municipality, whatever the particular form of local government. And the kinds of questions that we are just about to start analyzing in those surveys, which almost all cities have now completed for us, is to find out how, if at all, there is sort of strategic oversight or coordination by the Metropolitan Authority in relation to cultural and natural heritage, and how holistic that approach is in terms of different regulations and legislation. One of the key points actually of departure for this Heritopolis initiative is the realization, for all the reasons that my colleagues have already elucidated, that the metropolitan perspective is very important. But in many cities, perhaps the majority, ownership of cultural and natural heritage sites resorts either with the lower level boroughs or smaller municipalities, and or with a complex mix of national agencies, private trusts and foundations of whatever description, some secular, some religious, some non-governmental. and therefore trying to find an overarching strategic metropolitan scale of the ability to form holistic management and strategic oversight is a big challenge. And that's really what we're trying to find out, trying to advance, and the value of the comparison. And one of the ways in which we're actually doing that is looking at how the different cities are engaging with the new urban agenda, for example, and the sustainable development goals, particularly goal 11.4, which is in the goal specifically on sustainable cities and human settlements, to find out how these global sustainable development agendas that were formulated, agreed, and are being implemented since 2015-16 are being received and enacted, if at all, in these different cities. And unsurprisingly, the answers are very diverse, but we will hopefully be presenting the summary of that analysis at the World Urban Forum later this year. And maybe I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. Okay, so let me just now see the wrap up with our last speaker, Jihon Choi, but known to us as Jay, has been our touchstone in generating our first internal conference in Seoul last December. So I think that this is an important part to actually look at. He is in the field of human geography for over 30 years. I've known him for many, many years as working within the field of World Heritage Studies in the Graduate School of Konkuk University. So he has been also Secretary General of ICOMOS Korea. He's got a wide range of public activities, and he is really the elder of conservation in Seoul. So Jay, over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Can you hear me? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Jay Choi. I'm a professor of geography and world heritage studies of Konkuk University, located at Seoul, South Korea. Thanks for inviting me anyway in this precious plenary dialogue. I'd like to give the Seoul example in the 2000 years of history of urbanism, because I think that each metropolis has unique trajectory history over time, so that there are quite different ways to deal with the heritage from the past, reflecting contemporary and future value in terms of the heritage policies. For instance, Seoul has over 2,000 years history from BC 18 as the capital city of Baekje Kingdom until now. Since late 14th century, Seoul has been a capital city of Joseon Dynasty and continuously become a capital city of Republic of Korea until now. It has over 10 million population within the area size of 605 square kilometers, known as one of the highly populated metropolis in experience rapid urbanization and industrialization process in such a short period of time, starting from the 1960s. Originally, Seoul was the walled city, so-called Hanyang-do-song, so that northern side of the Hangang River has most of the historical remains combined with the unique natural setting like basin topography by 4 hills and outwardly stream, Cheonggyecheon River, surrounded by the city wall. The Seoul Metropolitan Government actually established its direction of heritage policies to restore Seoul as a historic city. 2 strategies are taken. The first one is the inscription of the Seoul City Wall and its associated mountain fortification system on the UNESCO World Heritage List. The second one is the setting of plans for sustainable preservation, management, and the cultural properties, including restoring old Baekje fortresses as well as the Seoul City Wall and its associated properties too. Also, the metropolitan government make every effort in taking comprehensive measure for preservation of Seoul as an ancient city, restoration of a historic site, promoting intangible heritage and integrating cultural heritage within tourism resource and the landmarks. I'd like to mention that the metropolitan heritage is an ongoing heritage making process, so-called heritagification, associated with various efforts, including urban regeneration programs. Besides the historical properties from long history like royal palaces and shrine, Seoul also has experienced unprecedented industrialization and urbanization from the late 1960s. You can see those the rapid population expansion rate and also the growth of the built-up area, expansion of the built-up area starting from 1957 until 2005. One example out of this industrial experience would be Seoul Row 7017 project, which converted an industrial site nearby Seoul railway station into public space over 1 kilometer multi-story of walking street with 19 convenient facilities, including open theater, playground, resting area, cafe, and so on. The name of 70 is from the year of original construction, and the 17 is from the year of 2017 when the project is finished. Another good example can be the Future Heritage Palace, which is composed of the selected historical sites with notable figures in history or story and memories from citizens, intending to preserve intangible or tangible properties for future generations. Local residents and heritage experts are encouraged to submit recommendations for potential site. Then site selection can be done throughout collaborative process of local community and the management committee of the Seoul Metropolitan Government. There are over 470 future heritage up to now in the category of political, industrial, civic life, urban management, and culture and art. Okay, Mike, that's it. This is all for my presentation in this given time. Thank you for your attention and listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jay. And I appreciate, in fact, that you are not in your pajamas now here in Seoul. So, but I think that we're now come to the end. I think you had a great opportunity of listening and sharing the experiences of metropolises around the world and exactly how they're beginning to address this issue of heritage in the metropolis. It's, as I said, between the past, present, and future. So at the end of the session, just like to say is that we would like to go beyond our own box. It's not thinking outside the box, but it's really changing the shape of the box. It is moving beyond then the city to the metropolis and taking on people with thinking to social change, social evolution, critical thinking in different fields from geography, migrations, economics, urban health and well-being. And this will allow us to redefine the conceptual platform on which our research will rely on in years to come. You're all welcome to join. And thank you very much, David, and the Nature of Cities for inviting us.